The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Don't adjust your screen. There is nothing wrong. You're about to enter a world where the very concept of time is rendered obsolete by the sheer power of entertainment. You're about to enter the Boggis Hour. The host of the Boggis Hour, Greg Boggis.
Hey everybody, welcome to another action-packed episode of the Boggis Hour. Tonight I interview a stand-up comedian from New Hampshire named Drew Dunn, and also we explore the vast, interesting places of the world with the co-founder of the Atlas Obscura, a man named Dylan Thuras. So, buckle your seatbelt, get ready for another trip with the Boggis Hour. So, here I am with stand-up comic, voice actor, Drew Dunn.
Yes.
From New Hampshire.
Hello, thank you. Thanks for having me, Greg.
Sure, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, of course.
So I'd like to talk to you about stand-up comedy. You're a young guy, new guy in the business, and from my impression, you're going to be moving on and upward. And so I like to attach myself to people that are doing well, because my career was flagging a bit. But I thought you've been a funny guy the first time I saw you, I think at one of the comedy competitions at Fody's a while back. Yeah. And you've been one of those young guys that's kind of everywhere, which is a good thing, working a lot of different places. You're developing a nice multifaceted act. So you're new to the business. What was it that was there any one comedian that got you really interested in stand-up comedy?
I wouldn't say one comedian, but I mean, I listened to a lot of stand-up comedy when I was young. You know, it was big family. We actually, the first time I think I really started listening to stand-up, we moved from Washington State out here, and we drove.
Oh, wow.
I was probably in like 7th grade at the time. So to pass the hours, you just listened to hour-long specials of stand-up comedy. Nice. So that's when I was first introduced to guys like Brian Regan, Jim Gaffigan. Those are probably one of my major two influencers. And I was too young to really appreciate the Bill Burrs and Louis C.K.'s, but
right.
Those are some of my favorites now.
Well, yeah, probably listening to maybe Louis C.K. or Billy Burr on a family road trip might have been a little...
Yeah, yeah. Well, half of us were too young. We're just hearing it. You don't even understand half the stuff. But yeah, those guys may be a little bit too blue for that.
Yeah. So Brian Regan, great,
yeah.
Like a clean actor, but also like a really strong character guy. You know,
facial expressions and voices,
that.
and just being,
storyteller.
And over the top too. You know, just really going after it, and that's when you get the biggest laughs. Is when you just really put everything out there and see what happens. And
Gaffigan, much more one of those kind of understated guys.
Yeah.
A lot, kind of cerebral, but goofy.
Right.
Fun to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially since he talked about a lot of stuff that I just directly related to. You know, it's just a lot of, here's the stuff that's happening. Here's what I'm going to talk about. We've all been camping and food and stuff like that. And it was.
And you're realizing that when you say stuff that people can relate to, it automatically draws them into you.
Yeah, it makes them want to listen to you, and that's something I've noticed a lot. Is when I can picture something, or can I talk about something that people have either automatically experienced or they've heard of, and then they'll just start listening to you and lock in, which is
sure. I think that would be Dane Cook was a big guy in that. He captured a lot of the zeitgeist of a lot of the people of his generation, and brought them in, and like, oh yeah, he's talking about these things that I experienced, and it just makes people it gives you a connection. And
yeah, and that was really his big thing was talking about the everyday stuff. That's what, if you go listen to half of his jokes, it's we've all done this, we've all done that, and then he just rips it apart for the next 10 minutes, which is awesome. He's one of the best at that.
And around here it was great because he used to talk about like Benson's Animal Farm, and talk about these local institutions. That was always a fascinating
and well, because my childhood was still out here. I was really split between here and the West Coast. I was born in Boston, lived in Massachusetts, and then Amherst, New Hampshire for a couple of years. Okay. Then we moved out to Washington State. My dad got a job out there, lived there from maybe like 1st grade through 7th grade, and then moved back here, and I've been in Nashua since, just kind of floating around. And,
yep.
Yeah.
So when you finally decided to do stand-up comedy, was there anything that finally said, hey, I'm going to try that?
Yeah, it was something I always knew I wanted to try. I never knew how to get started, you know. And it was my senior year of college. I've been a baseball player my whole life.
Yep.
Got hurt. I couldn't throw anymore. I hadn't.
There goes that career.
Well, there goes that career, and there goes all this extra time I'd never had in my life
Yep.
before. So it was, I needed something, and I saw one of my friends. He was down at BU. He'd done a couple open mics, and he was a kid I never thought in a million years would try it. So I was like, okay, let me go down, see what it's like. Saw him doing open mic, and I was like, okay, I can do this.
And where did you see?
He was just did something. It was through the school. They were in like a little basement at the BU center there.
Yep.
And then I was like, hey, I want to do this. Let's go do an open mic together. And I started writing down some ideas. And the very first bit I wrote down was I used to work at Walmart, and you've heard that bit before. And I was it just kind of went from there, and I just started to kind of build off of that.
So your first time, you felt pretty good about your set?
I was pretty confident. I mean, I didn't really know what to think. It was I went on the 28th at an open mic.
Really?
It was 1:30 in the morning. So
Nice.
the response wasn't there. The people that I brought with me, which was my brother, his girlfriend, my dad, and then a couple of my buddies who were sitting through a brutally long comedy
28
show.
is a lot of comics.
Yeah, and then there was them who were listening, and then like 3 passed out people at the bar and the host. And then the guy who goes on next after me, they just start shutting down the lights and everything. And that was my first time.
So that was first time, and then
I was so nervous. I was super nervous beforehand. And once I saw some people not do so well, like I saw some people go up there and bomb, like, okay, well, that's the worst that happens. Nobody laughs, and then you get off stage.
Right.
And once that was kind of the realization, I was like, okay, I can go up there.
yeah, and for so many comics, that's that's the fundamentals of it. Your worst day is a group of people who you will probably never ever see again.
Right.
Don't particularly buy what you're selling.
Yeah,
You know what I
exactly.
mean?
And that's the good thing about
It's like
comedy.
a shitty cold call.
Right. Well, that's the good and the bad thing about comedy, too, is that everybody finds something different, and you never know what the crowd's going to like until you actually throw something out there. Right. That's kind of the fun of it is, I wonder if they're going to like this. You know, the last guys did, like maybe the guys before didn't, so it's different every time.
So you've been, you did some voiceover work.
I did, yeah.
So that's what's great. As you start to do comedy, it starts to kind of bounce into different things. Some people get writing work, some people get acting work, and you got voiceover work pretty early on, which is cool.
Yeah,
How did you land that?
I'm just trying to keep my my options open and try and do a little bit of everything. You know, I've been doing really well in comedy, so I figure why not try and see where else I can, you know, get in and while I'm doing it. So voice acting is something I've always wanted to do as well because I do a lot of voices and different things when I'm doing my act. So I figure why not try and utilize it. When I'm messing around with my friends, I'm doing a bunch of voices and accents.
So is that something you always did that? You kind of always did? You must have actually did impressions of other friends and things like that?
Yeah, it's not so much impressions like of people. Like I don't do like the celebrity impressions and stuff as much as I do like the accents and characters, right? And that's something I've been doing for forever. Like I can remember they had this skits show. I don't know if you ever heard of it called All That. When I was very young. It was on Nickelodeon. It was like an SNL for kids that were like 10 to 12 years old. And they had this competition that was like, submit your video and be a member of the cast and do all this stuff. So I remember making a video and I was walking around like Steve Irwin, walking around my black lab, like, blimey, there he is. It's just, I was like 8 years old and I was watching the video the other day and I was like, oh, I guess I was always doing stuff like that.
So what was the job that you recently did?
It was I was playing a 10 to 12-year-old British kid.
Oh, nice.
Which was it was a lot of fun. I got to just kind of experiment. It was my first real time kind of doing it in a formal setting like that.
The nice microphone.
Yeah, with the microphone.
Yeah, it's weird when you hear yourself in that kind of an environment. You're just like, wow, I do sound like a pro.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. You know, I got to really kind of play around. They were really kind of let me do some things off the script too, which was really cool. And it's just going to prepare me for more. I just want to do more of it the more I can. So that was my first time going to New York City since my 8th grade Spanish field trip. I don't know why we went there for Spanish class, but that's where we went. So I was there. I got to do a couple open mics while I was in town. I figured I'd make the most of it, and I'm going to definitely try and do some more whenever I get the chance. So.
Great. Keep at it. Yeah. So here's the point where I ask you my 3 questions. What's your best show that you've done so far?
Best show, I would say, I was at it was a late show at Comics at Foxwoods.
Oh, okay.
It was a 10:30 show. I had no expectations going because it's a late show. You expect maybe 30, 40 people. The place was sold out. There was like probably close to 300 people
Nice.
there. This was a few months ago, and I got to do a 15-minute set, which was my longest set I had done there. And everything was just hitting so well, and it was an amazing feeling. And like I still go back and listen to that. It's like, okay, because as you know, when you go through your set more and more, you kind of tweak little things here and there that you don't mean to. So that's one that I'll remember for a long time. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's great when everything, like all the cylinders are hitting.
Yeah.
There's no science to it. It's an art.
Yeah, absolutely.
How about your worst show so far?
Worst show, competing with that open mic that we were just talking about. Not much gets worse than those, I would say. I would say maybe the worst show reaction-wise was probably the first open mic I did in New York City. I went with my buddy, same buddy who started off in Boston,
Yep.
who I went to the show with. He lives in New York now, so we went to this place called the Alligator Lounge in Brooklyn. It was a fun little room, and people were up there. They were doing their thing, and just no comics were paying attention, listening. You can tell, you could just feel like the anger. It's just like, oh, okay, maybe we
Basically
should.
all comics.
Yeah, it was all comics, and those
That's
are never fun. I mean, they can be fun. I shouldn't say that. When you're hanging out with comics and friends and stuff like that, it's fun.
They're
but,
rarely fun.
Right. Well,
But
comics,
they can be.
and as a comic myself, I'll try and laugh and I'll try and listen to the show, but at the same time, I'm analyzing and I'm thinking, oh, how would I have done that differently or whatever.
And the most unusual show so far?
Most unusual show, I wouldn't even call it a show. It was I was waiting tables back in when I was at UMass Lowell.
Yeah.
And I had done a couple of shows there with Mike Katrobis. It was probably my second and third time on stage. Was there in front of like 80 people because my buddy who was the manager, they were putting shows on there. He's like, hey, my buddy just started doing stand-up. Can you get a 5-minute spot? So some of the regulars at the restaurant heard that I had done some stand-up, and they were like, oh, you should tell us some jokes. And we were just in the middle of a restaurant, like I'm serving not only this table, but like 5 other tables. And I was like, maybe after. And then there was a couple of tables like, oh, we'll definitely come and watch. And then it was only one table that ended up sticking around. So I was sitting in a lounge at the UMass Lowell Conference Center to 3 people who were probably about 55, 60 years old, my demographic, really. And I just told them about 5 to 7 minutes worth of jokes, and they listened, they smiled, and that was about it.
First time you ever opened for a sommelier.
Yes, right. The only time I've done comedy next to a fireplace.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, Drew Dunn, stand-up comic,
Yeah.
voice actor, New Hampshire guy. Keep doing what you're doing, and hope to see you around again. Come back on my show
Of course.
when you have your own show.
For sure.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Greg. Appreciate it.
I thought a drink would magically solve all my problems.
And then you don't even have the decency to...
I thought it would give me courage.
I thought that it would help me fit in.
I thought it'd be the life of the party.
I never thought this would happen to me.
I thought I was only hurting myself.
If alcohol has lost its magic for you and you can't stop drinking,
I took action, and my life has changed.
I'm out living life to the fullest.
Now I have friends that accept me for me.
I realized I don't have to drink anymore.
I've stopped hurting the people that I love.
AA gave me hope.
you'll find us in the phone book, your local newspaper, or on the web at aa.org. Alcoholics Anonymous.
So, here I am with Dylan Thuras, co-founder of the Atlas Obscura, at his home base in New York.
That's right. And good to be here with you, Greg.
Yeah, so this is one of those interesting things where our entire relationship to this point has been digital. You and I, talking on the computer, emailing each other and all that. We've moved a little bit closer to an actual friendship by actually seeing each other on a screen.
Still digital, but slightly more interactive.
Slightly more interactive. So why don't you tell me, although I know what it is already, but tell us, me and the folks here at the Boggis Hour and the viewers, what the Atlas Obscura is.
Sure, of course, yeah. So sometimes we call it a guide to the world's hidden wonders. It's one way to put it. It is a website devoted to unusual, curious, wondrous places all around the world. And it's user-generated. People submit places they know about, places they've been, places that they, maybe they've seen somewhere and just think have the right qualities for Atlas Obscura. And then we have an editing team that helps fact check and turn those things around and publish them. So we have a database of over 10,000 places all over the world. And what we hope is that it's filled with places that you have never heard of before and yet totally. My favorite thing is when people say, I found something on the Atlas Obscura that was 2 miles from my house and I had never heard of it. And that's kind of a perfect example of what the Atlas hopes to bring to its readers. And
so I can't remember when I actually came upon the Atlas Obscura, but I was immediately the graphic for the Atlas Obscura is a really interesting, compelling piece of artwork, and I was quickly drawn into looking at what it had to offer, and it's kind of got a multi-tiered approach. It's got interesting news articles, and then it's got essentially what I consider to be the wonders of the internet is the ability to take interesting things and put them on the internet so that humans can then interact with these places and hopefully interact with people. I think it tends to be too much of just either the person interacting with a computer or maybe even interacting with another person on a computer as opposed to actually going out into places and forming a tactile, physical relationship with places on the earth and with other people. And this seems to be kind of a clearinghouse of bringing people to places and then people of like-minded interests together.
That's right, and we have 3 parts to the Atlas, and I only talked about one of them. So one of them is this database of places that's user-generated by people like you. You've added like 12 wonderful places to the Atlas.
Thank you.
So that's one piece. And then another piece is our articles, original content that we've written about interesting things. Sometimes they have place elements, sometimes they're amazing histories, sometimes they're interesting science discoveries, but it's the idea is sort of looking at a world with a sense of wonder. And then the third piece is events where we actually try and get people out together to go to these places. So it can be a small thing, like 30 people sort of going to the back room of a museum, something they wouldn't get to see normally, or big groups, 300 people learning how to lockpick, being taught by the world's greatest lockpicker about the history of locks. And that was an event we actually did here in New York that was also a building that had an amazing lock collection. So it sort of tied place with the event. So those are the different parts. And I think the whole site brings together people of a like mind who kind of look at the world with a certain sense of curiosity, maybe just an interest in the unusual.
Yeah, on the front page of the website, it has basically the credo. This is what we believe, that there's something new under the sun, every day, all day, all over the world. Around the corner is something that will surprise the hell out of you. The third one is,
I think.
Oh yeah, people who still believe in curiosity and wonder.
Yeah, it's for people who still believe in discovery, and I think part of our idea was that sometimes the internet makes you feel like everything has been discovered, that the whole world has been picked through, and there's sort of nothing amazing to discover. And I just deeply don't believe that. I think that the world is full of amazing, incredible things, and some of them are around the corner from you, and it's sort of, are you willing to look and keep asking questions until you discover the thing that's incredible and wonderful about it?
So how did you, well, first of all, what year did the Atlas Obscura come to be?
It was started in 2009.
So it's been around for a few years now.
Yeah.
And give me a little bit of how it actually came about.
It started entirely as a passion project. So I was moving to Budapest, Hungary, with she wasn't my wife then, but we're married now. And we were going to be there for a year, and a friend gave me an out-of-print book called Weird Europe, which is a wonderful book. We started to say, why is this out of print? And also, why isn't there sort of a great resource for this for people who want to seek out these kind of amazing, wonderful places all over the world? And so we said, maybe we could build something. Maybe we could figure out how to get the wisdom of everyone. 'Cause when you ask this question to people, what's something weird that you grew up with or you knew about? Everyone sort of says, there was that one place. There's that one thing a few miles from me. And so we hoped that by making this kind of an open system, we'd create this community of sort of amateur explorers. So it started with that. It grew over the next 3 years. And it was kind of a part-time gig. Everyone was doing things to pay the bills. And then the support from the users and just the internet in general was so strong that we decided, okay, we're going to try and make a real go of this. So around 2012, we sort of made it my full-time job, got an office. We've been growing from there.
And so you said in 2012 is when you kind of really started to really, and what was it, you gave a statistic on how many entries have been made by the community?
We have over 10,000 places in the Atlas database. And then we've written a couple thousand of our own original pieces, and we've done over 1,000 events, and our total attendance of like 30,000 people across the events. So
the events, you call it the Obscura Society, is that correct?
That's right. And we have 5 chapters across the United States. So New York, LA, Chicago, DC, and Philadelphia. And we're hoping to start new chapters throughout the country soon.
So what I found great about it was I started to actually first, when I discovered it, I would start to go to the places around me that that I'm actually familiar with. So there's some places. It's called the Ghost Town of Monson, which is in Milford, New Hampshire. It's part of Milford, part Hollis. And it was this old town from the 1700s that was populated for it was like 30 or 40 years. And then it just then it's still not quite sure what happened, but it just kind of disappeared. And so there's still these wonderful stone walls and these foundation holes and the town pound. So you can just see that this was a place that humans put an incredible amount of investment in at one point, and for what reasons, not necessarily known, but it changes. And those are the kind of things that I always find fascinating. I walk on a rail trail, and it goes by the Milford was the quarry capital of New Hampshire, and New Hampshire is the granite state. And a mile from my house are the twin quarries. I think they were called Kittledge quarries, and 7 of the 8 columns to the U.S. Treasury building came out of that quarry. And so when you take a $10 bill and look at the back, that's the Treasury building. 7 of those 8 columns came from the town that I live in. So those are those kind of, and I have yet to actually, write that one up.
yeah, you got to do it.
But and so it's just really, and so now it has prompted me to, as I'm seeing new places, I'm like, oh, that's something that I've never seen before, and I don't know if anybody has brought that to people's attention. I was just down doing an audition in Boston, and I'm walking by this, old, beautiful building, and there's enormous doors. They're about 20 feet high, and they look like they're made out of bronze, and they got all this, it looks like Egyptian carvings all over them. And it was the Salada Tea building from the early 1900s, and they have these enormous bronze doors that are basically a triptych of the tea industry for the time. So I'm like, there's another thing I'll go and look and see if it's there, and I just noticed, and there's just all these hidden treasures, like you say, right around the corner, that are there to be seen, and we tend to be caught up in whatever the day-to-day drudgery of life and all these things, and they really are these fabulous, wonderful, beautiful creations, whether human-made or naturally made, that are to be wondered upon and to be looked upon with a new eye. And that's really why I've enjoyed my involvement with the Atlas Obscura for just this brief amount of time. It's a really great way to explore.
Yeah, and I think what's fun is as you start doing this, you start sort of looking for these things and looking at the world with this kind of question of like, see something that interests you, and you start to say, oh, what is that? What's the history behind it? And then things start to connect to each other. You learn about, okay, so the columns came from that quarry, and then you start thinking about where did the stone for these other magnificent buildings come from? What's kind of, and it starts to draw this network of fascinating connections in history all over the world. That's a really wonderful feeling. It makes the world feel deeper and richer and meaningful.
Yeah, so I really like that, especially in today's time and environment. It really seems that there's tends to be a focus on, just a lot of things that are really fleeting and inconsequential, and a lot of like mean-spirited stuff. And this seems like something that it's just an awesome way of again making people think and opening up people's minds, and that's a really big accomplishment. That's why I wanted to actually talk to you or someone from the Atlas Obscura and to bring more people into the environment, into the place where that's what people are looking to do, as opposed to finding out what the latest Kardashian catastrophe has occurred.
Yeah, well, thank you. I'm so glad you found us. I mean, you are. I think the people who find Atlas, it either clicks with you or it doesn't. If it clicks with you, it's such a wonderful thing to sort of feel, oh, there's a community of people who are interested in looking at it this way.
Yeah, it reminds me of, you talk about finding that book in Europe about odd Europe, and it reminds me when I came upon the website of finding one of those books with all of this fascinating stuff in, except it's a gigantic digital book that everybody can keep on adding new chapters to.
Yeah, that's right. A never-ending book. We actually are making a physical book that'll be out in 2016, but it was hard because it covers the whole world. The book is going to be like 800 pages.
That's a tome.
Still not enough space. I mean, that's the thing is no book will ever be big enough to really do the job. So we're going to do our best with our book.
So what are a handful of the places like that really, really, maybe that you actually yourself inputted, or that when you found out about them because somebody else brought your attention to it, really knocked your socks off, that really wowed you?
I'll give you an example of each. One came very early into 2010, like about a year after the site started. We got an entry from like a hotel owner in India, deep in a part of India that's one of the wettest regions. It's actually the wettest region in the world. And he said, there are these bridges here that are unlike anything else in the world. They're grown out of the roots of trees. And these are now more well known on like BBC Planet and other things. But at the time, there was almost nothing on the internet about them. And I just could not believe this was something that I didn't know about, that wasn't common knowledge. It felt impossible to me that this was not something everyone was talking about. So that felt like just a true gift, and one of those moments when you realize that there are absolute wonders that are just unknown, just not being given the love they deserve. And then a place that I've been to, I was lucky enough to travel to, is a place called the Quechua, which is the last Incan bridge, and it's basically like an unbroken piece of history from the Incan Empire. They weave this bridge out of grass every year. It's a long bridge, a 50-foot suspension bridge, and 4 towns come together and spend a week weaving grass into little twine, and they weave the twine into bigger ropes, and they weave the ropes into this bridge that is the functional bridge for the community and for traveling in the area. And they've been doing it even though they remake it every year. It's been going on since the Incan Empire. It is a piece of the Incan Empire that just has remained effectively unchanged. And so cross it was a little scary. It was slightly unnerving. But it's beautiful and really wonderful. And that was a incredible opportunity to go see that. So that's another personal favorite.
And then how about, since you're in New York, how about a New York place?
So there is a place called the Atlantic Avenue Tunnel. And it is a real shame because it used to be open for tours. Okay, I'm going to go back to that. In the 1980s, a guy named Bob Diamond, a local Brooklyn guy, grew up here, heard a radio story about a tunnel that was underneath Brooklyn and basically been lost. And he started out. He started doing research. And after a year of looking, he was in the Brooklyn borough president's office and was asking about if they had anything on this. And they're like, no. But they're like, oh, there's that random kind of stack of papers over there. Like it's in the box. We don't know what's in there. He looks in there and he finds the plans for this tunnel. And so he goes to the middle of busy downtown Brooklyn, and he has friends at DOT, and they help him open up the manhole cover, get in there, and he comes to this bricked up wall. I guess maybe there isn't. But he decides to sort of, see if it has any give. Knocks this wall down, and he finds this, 12-block long, giant aero vault tunnel that turns out to be, depending on how you it, the first subway tunnel ever built. Walt Whitman wrote about it in the Brooklyn Eagle in the hundreds, and then it was supposed to have been filled in, but the corrupt politician basically just and left it.
Wow.
So this is still there, and the same guy who discovered it, Bob Diamond, was running tours there for a few years, and then the city shut him down. So now you can't get down there, but it's one of the great treasures of New York City. It's beautiful. It's filled with incredible history. There's all these crazy histories. Irish workforce built it in a record time, and supposedly they hated their work so much that they killed them and they buried them in the walls of the tunnel. I'm not so sure that's true, but the whole thing is just a wonderful piece of New York history, and it's just sitting there empty under downtown Brooklyn. It's like next to a Trader Joe's. People walk over every single day, and they have no idea that it's there. And that's just I got to go in there when he was still doing tunnels or tours, and it's just fantastic.
Great.
Yeah.
Wow, this was a real pleasure talking to you. I'm sure we're going to be talking again, and I'm sure we'll be meeting sometime. Hopefully, I'm going to get to New York this winter.
Please.
Yeah, and so is there anything you'd like to say before we wrap up the Atlas Obscura section of the Boggis Hour?
Just thank you for your great work on the site. You've been adding wonderful places, and it's just nice to meet a like-minded spirit, a kindred soul.
Yeah, New Hampshire's a great place. I always consider it the center of the universe. There's all of these interesting things that happen here. The monetary and the war treaties were signed here. Had some other interesting. There's never a recorded lynching in New Hampshire, which is a great chunk of history.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to spend a lot of time in New Hampshire trying to dig up all kinds of fascinating things because there's a ton of it around, and I'm going to be sharing it with people with the help of your website, and hope to really continue the working relationship of sharing stuff and seeing stuff that other people have shared. And I want you to keep on doing what you're doing, and the folks at Atlas Obscura are really doing a great service to people by offering them a heck of a hell of a resource of information and wonder.
Well, thank you so much, and I can't wait to see the next things you add. They're always wonderful, so I look forward to it.
Thank you, Dylan Thuras of the Atlas Obscura.
Thank you, Greg. Talk to you soon.
Cheers. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest on the Boggis Hour, email us here at theboggushour@gmail.com.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.